Hey guys, welcome back. So this is going to be a summary session where we are going to discuss on what we have learned in the last few lectures. So we had discussed on strings, we had discussed on file handling, we had discussed exception handling. We are going to talk about those three in this lectures, and we'll see few questions around these topics, right? So let's get started. We know strings. So strings are sequence of characters. We can use either single quotes, double quotes, or triple quote to declare them. They are immutable, and that means they cannot be modified after creation. And any operations that we are going to perform on it, which requires truncate or which requires addition into that string, will create a new object. All right. And we know there are escape characters, which is /n for new lines, /t for tab index, and slash for escaping other characters. Moving on, so we had seen some common methods, ord, which will return you the ASCII value of a particular character, chr will return the character value of a particular ASCII value. Then we have upper or lower case to change the case of the string. We have split function to split a string into multiple list objects using a delimiter, or if you don't use a delimiter, by default space is the delimiter. Again, join is used to join two strings. So strip will remove the leading and trailing white spaces if you provide nothing in the argument. If you provide an argument, or if you provide a character, then that character will be removed from the leading and trailing spaces. Okay. Replace is to replace a particular character in a string or replace a substring in the main string. Find and index is to locate a certain string or set of characters or a single character. So find will return you -1 if the particular character is not found, whereas index will throw you an exception if the particular character is not found in your main string. Starts with and ends with is again to check if a string starts with a certain character or if it ends with a certain characters. Right? We had seen slicing techniques. So the basic syntax of it is you have a text, you give a starting index and you give an ending index, and it creates a substring out of your main string. All right. So you can also provide just an ending index and don't provide any starting index. So it will by default pick the starting index as the beginning of your string and it will extract until end. Or if you give a starting index, it will start from that certain location or certain index and it will go until the last of your string. Okay. We have negative indexing, which is nothing but extracting text from the last, right? So if you have techniques, you give -3, it will extract the last three characters of it, right? Similarly, the next one, we have text : 2. So this is jumping the string. So this is the step variable. So this will jump your characters with 2 as the count. So if you give 2 and if you have your string as string string, so the first letter that would come out is S, next will be R, and the next will be N. Okay. Step -1, this is used to reverse a string. So here the step is -1 and we haven't specified starting index. So by default, it is going to start from the last with every step as 1 and it will create a character set of whatever we have provided. It will be just reversed. All right. Moving on, we had seen file handling, how to open, read, write, and manage files in Python. We had seen these. We had also gone through some examples where we used RWAB as the mode of the file, right? So R is for read, W is for write, A is for append, B is for binary operations. You can also use a plus operator here and combine multiple file modes. Say if you use R and plus. So R will by default open the file in read-only mode. Plus will give you a write access as well. But if the file is not existing, this would throw you an error. All right. So if you combine a plus with W, what happens? So it will directly truncate the file. So you open a file in write mode, and the plus operation gives you the read access as well. Now this will truncate the file. If you are trying to write something in the file, it would truncate everything. It will delete everything from the file and write a fresh copy. Okay, or it will write everything from fresh in the file. All right, and if the file is not created, this would create a file and write it there. Same thing is with append also. I mean, a and plus, append plus. So here what happens? It would write into the file towards the end. Okay, it would not truncate the file, or it would not delete the content of the file. Instead, it will write towards the end. And similarly, if the file is not created, it will create a file. You can also combine binary mode with your read write operation. So binary read, write into binary, and here again write and binary and plus. So this will give you, the last one will give you read write access both into the file, and you can also, I mean, if the file is not created, it would create the file. All right, simple. There are other combinations which is possible. You can always look through, like, but these are the very basic ones that you are going to use. These are the most used ones. Okay, now we had seen different efficient techniques to handle the large files. We were trying to read it line by line so that we don't load the whole file into our memory. We had seen how to open and read a file. You give the keyword open, the file name, and your file mode, whatever you want to pass here, right? If you give read, the file would be opened in read mode. And we had read line, and read lines. Three different methods to read a file. Read would directly read the file and give you the output as a set of string, right? Multi-line strings. Read line will read it line by line, and read lines will read all the lines line by line and give you a comma separated list value. Then writing to files, we have write mode and append mode. Right? We had seen all of these examples. I just listed it here for your reference. What is error handling? Error handling makes your code more robust, right? So it's a way how you can handle your runtime errors so that your code doesn't crash. So sample of how we handle error is, we have try, except, else, and finally block. In your try block, you have the actual code that runs. Except block will catch the exceptions during the runtime. Else block will only run when there was no exception raised. Okay. Finally is one block which always runs regardless whether where an exception was caught or not caught. Finally block will always run towards the end of your try block. What is the use of finally block? So it's more like a step down code, okay, where you want to close all the things that you had done. You want to delete your variables, or say you want to close your files that you had used. You want to close the database connection. So all of those things are taken care in your finally block. Now we had also seen some exceptions that we can come across while we are dealing with different data in Python. So zero division error is where you try to divide a number by zero and you get this exception. Value error is where you are expecting a certain type of value. Say you are expecting integer and you get string there, and you are trying to convert that string into an integer value. You are trying to typecast a string into integer value. Then you would get a value error exception. You also have type error. These are raised when you are trying to do some operations on different type of data. Say you have a string, you have a number, and you are trying to add them. Okay, you're trying to perform an add operation. Index error is again when you are dealing with a list and you're trying to access some index in the list which is not present. Suppose the list is declared until the fifth index and you're trying to access the sixth index. So you'll get the index error. Key error is again with the dictionary where you are trying to access a non-existent key. File not found error is again raised when the file you are trying to access is not found. Name error is where a variable hasn't been defined yet and you are trying to access it. Moving on, we had seen custom error messages that we were passing. We had seen custom exception classes. We also suppressed the exception that we already know is going to come, but we still want the code to run. So we use suppress as the keyword there. And we also saw how to re-raise an exception. and handling multiple exceptions in a single except block, right? So when I say multiple exception, I mean you combine different type of method, not a generic exception block, generic except block where by default all the exception is dumped. Instead, we created except block with multiple type of exception, say zero division error or value error or type error. So all of these three are taken care in one except block, and rest of the exception are taken care in the next except block. All right, moving on. So I have few questions here that I had listed out. I also have them pasted in my PyCharm. There was some error and the video was not recorded earlier, so I have the examples worked out in my PyCharm. I will again go and give you a walkthrough of how you are going to handle these questions or what your answers should be. So let's open our PyCharm. So this is what we are going to discuss now. So how does string immutability affect string operation in Python? So we know strings are immutable, right? So strings are immutable. Any operation on it will create a new object, right? So this can lead to inefficiencies in memory and performance when you're trying to concatenate in a loop. Again and again, it will try to create new object of a string if you are trying to concatenate. So a more efficient way to handle that will be using the joint keyword. What is string interning and how does it optimize memory usage? So what is string interning? So string interning is nothing but it involves reusing existing string objects rather than creating new ones with the same value. So say you have a str1 declared as abc. Hold on. Let's see this. Let's see an example here, right? str1 is equals to abc. str2 is equals to abc. All right. Now what I'll see, I'll do a print. I'll say id of str1. Okay. And I'll say id of str2. Now what string interning means is, since the values are same, okay, so these two variable will point to the same memory location rather than having two different memory locations. Let's run this code and see what happens. Okay. Run. So if you see, both the memory locations are same. If you are going to change something here, say I changed it and I reran it, now the memory location is updated. So that's how string interning works here to optimize the memory usage. All right. Moving on. Explain how slicing works in Python string. What does s -1 do? Okay. So the basic syntax of slicing we had seen is str. We have a start index, we have an end index, and we also have a step. All right. So in this example, what do you see? You don't have a start index, you don't have an end index, and you have a step which is -1. Right. So let's do it in an example here. So I have a variable str abcd and I'm trying to print str -1. What -1 will do? From it, this is also called as negative indexing, right? Or negative slicing. So what it will do, from the last it will start and it will go up to the first character. All right. So it would give me an output of dcba, right? Let's run this. You have an output of dcba. Now next, what are f string in Python? How are they better than percentage or dot format? Okay, so we know that Python is both compiled as well as interpreted language. All right. So what are compiled based and what are interpreted based? So compiled code is the entire code of yours goes to a compiler. It is made in an executable or in a runnable format and the program is executed. Okay. An interpreter is something which reads the code line by line. Okay. So Python supports both, right? So the reason why f string is faster is because all of the instructions within an f string literal is performed while it is being compiled. All right. So anything that you provide as a f string is evaluated during the compile time, and then your code is executed. So by the time we are executing, all the f string is already in place, or like all the f string values are already in place of the print, and it is just like a normal string that is being printed. It is not being, there are no actions being performed on runtime there. Whereas if you use the ampersand or format, they will be executed only when you are executing your certain line of code. So line by line, those will be interpreted. So the execution time would be more here. Okay. Plus, there is also an advantage of using f string, which is it makes it more readable. Right? You have all your text and variable aligned in a single line. Right? Now, next question. How can you check if a string is palindrome in Python? Let's understand what palindrome is. So, palindrome are certain words which are the same when read from the starting index or when read from the ending index. So, reading it straight and reading it reverse is same, right? So, here is one example. We have level here. So, level is a palindrome word, right? Because if you read it from last also, it is the same. How do we check this? So we had seen -1 gives you the reverse of the string. So we have defined a function as is palindrome, and it takes an argument which is the string to be validated, and what it returns a boolean where it is comparing the actual string with the reversed string. So if both are same, that means the string is palindrome, right? Now here, if I run it for this particular variable level, I get true. Now similarly, madam is also palindrome word, and if I run this, I get true here. Now if you want to do the same operations on a number, so if you do it on a number, it would throw you an error. Why? Because I am performing a concat operation, or I am performing a slicing operation on a string which is not supported by integer class. So to do that, the simplest way would be to convert this as a string. Okay. Now, if you convert it to a string and if you run this again, you would get whether it is palindrome or not. It says true. So what I had here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Right. So this is my palindrome string. Moving on. What are some common built-in string methods used for validation, like checking if it's a digit, alphabet, etc.? So these examples will be very useful, or these methods will be very useful when you are working with string, because while you are trying to compare few values from your application, your from a certain application that you are testing, and from a data set which should match, you are definitely going to use these functions or these methods in your actual code when you are writing it, right? So let's see it one by one. So I have a string which I have declared as first winner. Now let me give a space here. Okay, I have first winner. Now the first one is str is digit, so this will check if this particular string has digit or not. Okay, the second one is alpha. This will check if it has only alphabets or not. The first one is only digits, second one is only alphabet, the third one is only alphanumeric, so only numbers and alphabets, right? The fourth one is lower, if it is in lowercase or not. The fifth one is upper, if it is only in uppercase or not. The last one that we have is space. It will check if there are only spaces in my string or not. All right. When you are doing some operation in your string or in your actual code base, say you got a scenario where you have a string and you are supposed to check whether a string is separated by 4 spaces or not, right? So how do you check that? So you're going to extract you're going to slice the string. In the sliced version, you are going to use is space, right? So let's run this for now. So what do I get? I get false, 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 true, false, false. So first one is false. Is digit is false. Is alphabet false. Is alphanumeric is also false. Is lower is true. Is upper false. Is space false. Now if you see here, this is alpha alphabets and numbers, then still it is false. The reason is it has a space inside it, right? So to overcome this, remove the space, run it. Now if you see, it returned me true here. True. All right, moving on to the next one. Yeah, what are different file modes in Python open function? So we have discussed this in the PPT. We have it in the PPT as well. There are multiple. You can come. There are append, read, write, binary. We can also club uh, two different type of operations using a plus operator. We had discussed that in the PPT. If you want to go through it, just go back in the video and you can refer it there. Okay. What is the difference between read line, and read lines? All right. So I have already explained this once, but there was some error in the video. That's why I'm redoing it to make you understand what we are doing here. Let's comment this first. Let's comment this one as well. And we are going to run this. So I have a file, myfile.txt. I am using all the three commands: read line, and read lines. Now we know read will read everything at once, read line will read only one line, and read lines will read everything in a line format, and it will return me a list of string. All right. Now let's see what it returns. Now when I'm running this, so the first one is picking everything from the string and it is returning me here, right? Now the second one is empty and the third one is empty. The reason is, by the time this file.read ended, it was already pointing to the end of the file. Now there was no other lines to be read. That's the reason this returned empty, empty, right? So to overcome this, we have to use a keyword file.seek 0. So it's going to the 0th byte. Okay, it's going to the 0th byte, where 0th is the byte, or 0 is where the offset you are trying to set. So file.seek 0 will move your cursor to the beginning of the file. Okay, whereas if you want to move to the end of the file, you are going to just set it as you're going to set it as 0, and you are going to provide another argument whence, where you are going to give 2, and it will move to the end of the file. But for now I want to move to the beginning of the file, so I'll just give 0 here and I'll say run my program. So what it is doing now, so the first one gave me the entire file content, the second one just gave me the first line, and the third one gave me a list of whatever lines we had. So it has all three lines in a list format. All right, then moving on to the next one. How do you ensure file is properly closed after reading, writing, even if error occurs? And we have clubbed the next question. What is the advantage of using a with statement when working with file? Okay. So to answer both of these, we have with. So what is the use of with? If you are going to use with open, you don't have to worry about closing the file. As soon as you are done reading or writing in the file, it will automatically close the file. Okay, so you don't have to worry whether my file is closed or not. So syntax is again the same: with and open your file. So right here I am not specifying any operation or any mode. Read is the default mode as F, and I'm just reading my file. All right. Now in the next one, how would you read a large file line by line without loading it entirely into memory? Okay, so we have two approaches here. In the first approach, what we did, we opened a file using the with command, and we used a for statement for each line in F. You're going to print everything line by line. Okay, and in the next one, what we did, So in the next one, this we had already seen when we were discussing files. So you open a file, you read a line, and you pass the line in a while loop until you encounter a line. You are going to print whatever I had read now, and you are going to read a line. So until this read line has some content or is not empty, it will continue. The loop will continue and it will print line by line. Moving on. How can you append text to an existing file without overwriting it? So you are going to use the append operation or the append mode using A. So file, say open your file name, and you are specifying the mode as A instead of write. So if you give write, it will omit the file or it will truncate the file and write new records to it. If you use append, it will add your line towards the end of the file, right? So what is the difference between syntax error and explanation exception in Python? All right. So syntax error is something which we introduce to the code. So if we are not writing the code in the proper way, so I write if a condition, and then you are going to give a tab and statement. But instead of this, if you forget a colon here, you don't give a colon and you write like this. So this is what a syntax error is. You are not writing the code in a way how it should be, right? So, and exception is what? Exception are something which is caught during the runtime. You don't have a control over it. You can handle it in a way where it impacts you the least, or you can build your code so robust in nature that they are able to handle all the exception and still work fine. What are syntax error? Syntax error is something that is a mistake from us, or which we are writing in an incorrect way. And another difference is syntax error are caught generally before execution, right? If you are using an IDE, the IDE itself will prompt you saying that you have a syntax error here, right? However, for exceptions, that's not the case. For exception, it's going to pop up only when you are executing your code. Okay. So say you are expecting an integer and you get a string, and you are trying to typecast that string to an integer. So it will throw you an exception. We had seen all of these, right? Moving on, explain the purpose of else block in try, except, else, finally, construct. What is the use of else block? So else runs only when there is no exception raised. As simple as that. So else block is used only when there are no exception raised. If there are exception raised, the else block would not execute, but finally would execute all the time. Moving on, what is the difference between catching a general exception versus specific one like value error? Okay, so here it's important to understand that when we are referring to general exception, what we are doing, we are just using an except block with an exception E, and we are printing a generic message saying exception occurred, right? However, when you are writing your code, you don't want this to happen with you. So what you want to handle each exception individually. Say you have an application where you are expecting a string to be entered, and that particular string is again concatenated, right? So instead of string, you have entered a number there, right? So that's a value error. This except will catch that exception and it will just give you a message exception occurred, right? But if you have a value error exception explicitly defined, or if you have a null pointer exception, or if you have no file found exception, so if those are separately defined, you can define in those except block what set of actions you want to perform next if this particular exception is encountered. So general exception, it will give you a generic error message saying that this has happened. But if you are going to use specific error handling block, so if you are going to use a separate except block for each type of exception, you are going to handle each of your exception in a more meaningful way. So that's the difference between general exception handling and specific exception handling. Moving on, how do you raise a custom exception in Python? Provide an example. So we had seen this, right? So we create a class with a name. We use a argument here, and I'm not going to do anything here. I don't want anything to be done. I have a try block. In this try block, I am just printing nothing, a blank message. and I am raising my exception. My exception is something that I have declared. Now what I need a except block to catch this exception. So this except block is catching my exception and it's throwing the exception. So this print statement will print something is fishy. If we have to run and check, let's run this. So it says something is fishy, which is coming from here. And my exception is a class which is of type exception, which is declared here, which I have declared as separate class. What does the finally block do and when is it executed? So I just explained this. So finally is the last block of your code which is executed towards the end of your try block construct. A finally block, it's going to be executed towards the end after it has executed everything. Say try, except, or else, and then your finally comes in. So the ideal use of finally that we do is to either close the files that we had used, the database connection we are going to close there. If you have some cleanup you need to do before you end your script, you are going to use the finally block to do those things. All right. What is exception chaining in Python and how can it be useful? So let's understand what is exception chaining. So exception chaining is a way to link exceptions together where one exception leads to another. It allows you to raise an exception while preserving the original exceptions that has occurred. Okay. Now to understand this, I have taken a simple example here. I have a variable or I have the string which I am trying to convert it to an integer. This will throw me a value error, right? But at the same time, I am also raising another exception as a runtime error, which is in my except block, and I am saying failed to convert. So what I'm doing is I'm converting, I'm expecting this exception, but in this exception, I am again raising another exception. All right. Let's see what the output is first. So I ran this. I got an exception. It says invalid literals for int, right? Which was expected, but should have been caught in this except block, right? Now in this except block, what I am doing is I am raising an exception from whatever is encountered to me. All right. And this exception is what I am saying in my runtime, there is an error. And I am giving the customer error message what I want to give here. I said failed to convert. All right. So here, if you see, it is clearly written the above exception was direct cause for the following exception. Okay. Since this exception has occurred, hence this exception was triggered. All right.